What's going on, everyone? I'm Eric, and this is Nifty Sports. Joining us today on this special episode is John Nellis, a Sorare content creator with a community of over 52,000 YouTube subscribers. We roll up the sleeves and dig into the roots of Sorare to help us determine what's ahead and see the incredible potential that it has. After this interview, I'm even more convinced that this French unicorn could be the eventual catalyst to mass adoption of sports NFTs. Make sure to hit that subscribe button for more content like this. And if you haven't started on Sorare NBA yet, you can use the link down in the description. It is a free-to-play, fully licensed game, and it's a ton of fun. I want to sincerely thank John for coming on and being so generous with his time and knowledge. I had an absolute blast, and I hope you enjoy it. Let's go. All right, everybody, we are live here and having the pleasure of having John Nellis, the biggest Sorare content creator out there, join the channel here today. I introduced this a little bit, but I'll give another quick introduction. He's coming all the way over from Cork, Ireland, across the pond, across the Atlantic, to talk to us today about Sorare, his specialty, something that has had incredible success. And we're going to see a little bit of a look of what his journey looked like and how it collides with maybe some of our journeys in the sports NFT world on NBA Top Shot or however you got started. So super, super happy to have John come on here today. John, thanks for joining us.
No, thanks for the invite, Eric. It's a pleasure. And I think the congratulations to you, or fair play to you, I suppose, for waking up so early. For listeners, I suppose you asked me when I could do it and I didn't know where you were. So I just said 2:30, but that's like 6:30 your time. So you're up bright and breezy, keeping the voice down so you don't wake everyone.
Hey, man, we got the coffee ready to go. I got, the wife knows that I'm doing an interview right now. So if she gets woken up, then, she'll have to forgive me later. But yeah, we are good and ready to go. I said, whatever time works for you works for me, man. I think there's a lot that we can get talking about today, man. I remember looking at your YouTube channel back when I first started mine, and it was probably, I started the YouTube channel in June, July of 2021. And a couple of times after that, it was always focused on sports NFTs. So Sorare had come up. I was thinking about doing maybe a piece on Sorare. Back then, you were probably around 5,000 to 10,000 subscribers on YouTube. Since then, you've 10x. So what that tells me is not only that Sorare has had the success, but particularly you and yourself as a content creator, to amass that type of following, the community has to be there. So building that community and being incredibly good at your craft is something that I look up to from you. So let's talk about your journey into Sorare, right? What was it that brought you in? What were you doing back in 2019 when Sorare launched?
So I joined in, when did I join? 2020, September 2020 is when I actually joined Sorare. And I suppose my whole life I've played like football. I'll call it football. Anytime I reference football today, it's not NFL, it's not American football, just for all y'all Americans out there. So I was playing fantasy football from I was, 15 maybe, so about 15 years ago. So I've always been into fantasy. And then I suppose in my later, maybe 4 years ago, got into there was a whole scandal in the UK. There was a project, I wouldn't even call it a project. It was a gambling company called Football Index. Okay. Basically burned to the ground. They Ponzi scheme, but it was based off lies, rug pulls, whatever you want to call it. There was 120 million or 100 million of people's money stolen, gone, lost forever. We'll not dwell into that today, but basically the draw of that platform and why so many people loved it in the UK and Ireland was that you could essentially speculate on the future of players.
Sure.
And you got rewarded for their real world experience, their real world performances. That's the crux of the matter.
Sure.
You could speculate, you got paid for their performances, and if they did really well, more people want to buy them. The price would go up. That's the crux of the matter. that platform was starting to crumble a little bit, and I made content about it. So I could see it kind of falling apart at the seams, and I was getting very frustrated on all my podcasts, all my content. Thankfully, for my conscience, I was shitting all over them because they were really annoying me.
Yeah.
Can I say bad words here, or do I have to be clean?
Yeah. Let it rip. Let it rip.
Okay,
Yeah.
so and then a good friend who also makes Sorare content, Quinny,
Okay.
he's basically my referrer to Sorare. He was like, John, you should really check this out. And I'd
Nice.
seen mumblings of it over the summer of 2020. You know, COVID had hit, nothing to do. I'd seen it and I was like, oh, crypto, blockchains, and Web3s, because I wasn't a crypto guy.
Yeah.
I had some crypto from 2017, but it was negligible.
Sure.
And anyway, finally got on a Zoom call. As quite often with these NFT platforms, they're so complex that I actually needed like a full-blown walkthrough from my friend for half an hour.
Yeah.
So Quinny and a guy, Hendo, two Scottish lads, jumped on with me, talked me through it for half an hour, 40 minutes, and I was in. And 2 weeks later, I was playing one of those COVID poker games with the boys, and had a few too many beers, and I was off buying cards in the Sorare market, having a ball, and then I just got hooked on the gameplay. So that's how it started, and then it's been a long 2 years since.
Incredible, man. That's funny how things start. I think there's a couple of things to unpack there. First of all, let's go back. There's one of the things that I had jotted down to talk to you about. And again, this is Sorare football, but we're talking European football here. For those of you who are in America, it's soccer, right? We call it soccer. It may be offensive if we say, soccer, but it is what it is. But I'm curious as to the culture of fantasy football over there, because our fantasy football is maniacal almost, man. I'm in 3 fantasy football leagues. I've been playing since I was 15 also, but it's deeply rooted in American football culture. What's it like for European football? Because there's so many leagues out there. There's English Premier League. Each country has their own league. What's the fantasy sports culture like within European football? Briefly.
So I think there's kind of like so to break it down, every country is different. Every country has their own fantasy game. There's obviously lots of different languages. But the biggest league is the Premier League. That is the biggest league globally. That is the biggest league in Europe. So that game has about 10 million players this year. This is the first year that broke 10 million players in Fantasy Premier League. It's the official one.
And that's England.
Outside that, that's the English Premier League. Then outside that, you'll have like the German games and the La Liga games. I don't play them. I've never even seen them. They wouldn't be anywhere near as big. They wouldn't be as played globally. So they aren't really as big a thing globally in the soccer world. Now, I think the big difference is that when you look at American sports, it's that culture of fantasy within, you're watching the game and they might say he's just scored X amount of points on fantasy, or afterwards the pundits might reference their fantasy teams. That's not something we've had here, but this year that's changing. So I am absolutely locked out, imposter syndrome through the roof, being on Sky Sports, which is the main sports broadcaster in the UK, England and Ireland basically, or the whole of England, Scotland, Wales and Ireland. And they've now got a chat that last week there was a program on Sky, half an hour fantasy football show.
Yep.
And I'm there talking about fantasy football, and they're starting to bring these stats up in Match of the Day, which is like I don't know what your equivalent is. Is it Red Zone or something? I don't know. At the end of the week, they show all the games and all the highlights type of thing.
Okay. Yeah. Like a sports
it's basically,
center. Okay.
It's starting to infiltrate the sport is what I'm saying. Fantasy this year is like, it's almost like a turning point because they've hit the 10 million. The biggest broadcasters are leaning into it, and they're really going to fantasy. So I think perception's changing. It's growing, but it has by no means been ingrained in society for generations like it has in the US. And they're very different. There's the English game, the French game, that I don't even know about the games outside England. And then the only other one is there's like a Champions League game, which is for like the inter-European competitions where they all play each other. But that's the issue, isn't it? Because there's so many different leagues and teams, and it gets quite messy.
Sure. Yeah. And that kind of ties into a little bit of the background that I saw about the Sorare game in particular. But another question, just asking off the top of my head, because that what you described there in fantasy is kind of what I've started to see here in the States in terms of sports betting. What's the sports betting culture like? More so now than ever are the TV programs starting to incorporate like betting lines. within their normal
Yeah.
talk, right? Is it like that in Europe as well? Or I'm just curious as to what that looks like over there, because I'm seeing that trend here as opposed to you seeing the fantasy trend pulling in there. We've had the fantasy shows, they make specific shows running up to the early slate of games on Sunday, particularly about fantasy football over here. Hour-long shows. There's tons of content.
Yeah, I think in terms of sports betting, it's been like a absolute degenerate society thing problem maybe for a long time now, like decades where, I don't know, it's a relatively new thing in America, is it? It was always illegal, but now, like for decades here, you'd go into the bookies, you'd go in and you put a bet on for a match, or people would bet on this or bet on that. Horse racing's a big thing.
Okay.
People would be down there, greyhounds, football, rugby, whatever, people betting on all sorts, every sport. I think it's a weird one when you get to that from like a broadcasting level, because they typically, while betting companies will sponsor a lot of these shows and there'll be ads at the breaks and whatever else, they typically don't intertwine that with their punditry. Like, and the favorites today, we say them different. You say like plus 100 and minus 250 and all these things, don't you? We say like 4-1, 3-1, 2-1.
Right.
We say, it's a bit different. Evens, we'd say, it's a bit different over here. But they don't really incorporate that because I think that kind of promotes gambling, which is different. Like it's not, I wouldn't say it's frowned upon in culture, but it's definitely dubious. It's a little bit taboo, kind of, as I said, degenerate. It's a little bit like there's something there. So like they wouldn't be singing and dancing about it, but they'll take the money from the gambling companies and run ads. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It feels that way. It feels that way here, but the fact that it's being more normalized, I mean, there's so much money in that, right? People will always, want to place a wager on a game and keep their attention on the game because of that reason. So I'm very curious. Thanks for breaking that down. Going back to Sorare, right? So you came in, you had a little bit of experience with this football index, right? And you liked it because you can bet on the future of the players. How early on in their careers were you betting on the future of them? And how similar is it to Sorare? Because us just breaking into the basketball, right? You got the rookie cards and you don't know how promising that career is going to be, but the rookie card, they obviously only have one card for their first season before who knows what happens and comes along into the next season. So how similar was that fantasy, the football index to what Sorare is doing? Is it just the blockchain that distinguishes it, or break it down a little bit?
So football index was like a gambling platform where basically you'd be basically placing bets with that company where you might buy your Jude Bellinghams and they sell you them at a certain amount, and then you would yield based off how he performs, and then they calculate all what they expect him to yield over a career, and that's what they set the price at, blah, blah, blah. I mean, soccer is a different sport than baseball, basketball, and American football in terms of like what age players really come to life. I don't know. I know baseball players are typically a bit older, but like football, there's players on Sorare because they have the full licenses, where you could be buying 15, 16-year-olds who have somehow got signed up to a first team. You have no idea where their career will go. But if they look electric and they look amazing and they have all the talent in the world, maybe you want to buy them and hope that it's the next Messi, it's the next Ronaldo, and you've bought their 16-year-old card, of which there's 42 of, So it's that kind of speculation about scouting and backing your instincts. The issue is, I suppose, you can only get players that play already at kind of a relatively top level, top 20 leagues in the world. But even within that, there's a lot of speculation, buying a youngster who plays in like the top 5 leagues would be like England, Spain, Germany, France, and Italy, right? But then there's also a load of other leagues on Sorare, which is the beauty, where you've got the Asian leagues, South American leagues, the MLS, you've got Portugal, Netherlands, Belgium. You've all these lesser leagues to an extent where there's young players who might get transferred to the biggest clubs in the world over the next season or two. So it's all about speculation, as in like who's going to be the next world beater for Real Madrid. Who's going to be the next best player for Manchester United? Who's going to be the biggest player in the world? And it's about speculating on that, So yeah, you can buy them as soon as they're minted in Sorare, like just typically whenever they're a first team player.
Wow, that's like buying a high school American football player or a college baseball player or
Yeah.
a single A minor league player. It's really adds a different dynamic to it. Interesting, because I know
Imagine
there's
you
a
go
lot.
to a college game. Sorry, I brought it in, but imagine you go
Yeah,
to a college game and you see a
yeah,
guy, you think he is incredible. He's going to be the next Tom Brady,
yeah,
and you go and buy him, and then you wait 5 years, and he becomes someone who looks like it might be the next Tom Brady. There's massive
sure.
upside there,
Yeah,
but also massive risk.
to some extent, even though when it comes to college already, you already have a good sense. So it's not even as much of a risk anymore. When in college, they have the conferences that are just putting out professional athletes, right? So when it comes to that, it maybe even seems a little bit earlier. Those guys are a little bit more established. And while there's definitely standouts when it comes to college, but you would think when it comes to looking at those guys, maybe it'd even be too late at that point. Who knows? It's something really interesting to think about. I wonder if it ever gets there for us.
Yeah, I wonder will Sorare ever like move into licensing? Like, I don't understand these things because you're gonna laugh at me, but like, what comes before basketball? Like NBA? Is it college basketball?
college basketball. Yeah.
Like, imagine I don't know if that could ever be licensed, but imagine that.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't know. Is that a big? I know like the football is huge at college level. Like they sell out massive stadiums. Is it the same at basketball?
Basketball is big. The basketball tournament is really big. It's called March Madness. If you're familiar with it, you've probably seen or at least heard of it. But what happens in college basketball is there's so many collegiate programs. They take they take 64 teams at the end of the season and put them all in one do or die, one loss elimination tournament. And then when it gets down to the end, they're basically filling these days a football stadium with what they call the Final Four. And then just having that all as one massive event where, typically in a basketball arena, you get 15,000 in college would be a massively large crowd on a regular standard. Now they're playing in front of 100,000 people almost,
It's crazy.
at Jerry World out in Dallas or wherever they decide to have it. But yeah, it's pretty big. Who knows what the new name, image, and likeness licensing deal could look like in the future? That's something I haven't really put much thought to, but it would be crazy to think about because there's already people coming out. There's other leagues too. Some people are foregoing college basketball and going into these G League programs, which is like a minor leagues. There's teams specifically that are signing these guys. One of them is called the G League Ignite, where guys who don't want to play college basketball, they just go take 1 year, 2 years, or however long it takes, and then take their shot at the pros. So that's a little bit more recent, but it's an interesting dynamic. Let's take a look, if you don't mind, back after you got in and the major inflection points. So like, there's obviously a lot of funding to Sorare, right? Like back, I don't know what point, if you could tell us a little bit about where it was at when you got into it in September of 2020, and then the major jump off growth points. Was it a steady thing? Was there explosive growth when the funding rounds came in? Or what's your memory of, like when this thing got so big and blew up? How did that all play out for you in your journey?
So I think I joined in September. I tipped away, had a bit of fun, whatever else. Over a couple of months, accumulated a few cards into January. I don't know at that stage what sort of exposure I have. I could go back and look, but it would take me a minute. But then there was a very clear inflection point where hockey sticked, and rumors kind of started to come out that they'd raised 50 million in February 2021. This was just kind of pre-NF, sort of maybe during the NFT boom or slightly during, don't know. So 50 million, relatively small money in comparison to what they're at now. And
this was when rumor in February of 2021.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was around then.
Massive
early February 21.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there were rumors coming around. The thing about that was that what really set Sorare off was those rumors, and then Gary V tweeted on Valentine's Day 2021. Gary V basically came out and said, like, tweeted a Sorare card, and this was like Gary V was the NFT guy.
Yep.
and the market just boomed. Like,
Wow.
I mean, I've pulled up a couple of charts here to look at. I'll just give you a couple of numbers off it. Like on 20th of February 21, the volume was at 406 ETH. That was on auctions. So that's what was spent on auctions directly to Sorare on the 20th of February. So 400 ETH there. There was over 1,000 ETH spent on the 27th, and over 700 ETH spent on the 28th. Over 600 for multiple days outside that, 900 another day. Basically, thousands of ETH exchanging hands on offer volume. So that's like between managers. So like if me and you trade a card versus me buying it directly from Sorare. So you're talking from, let's call it January, where the volume on a given day might have been 30 ETH.
Okay.
Between managers and paying Sorare, depending on the cards that were in auction that day, anywhere between maybe 30 and 50. So you're talking maybe 80 ETH a day combined across the whole market. For like, I mean, hockey stick on the 25th, 26th, 27th of February to thousands of ETH worth of volume in the market. There was a massive influx of new users. If I go back in the charts, if we look here, let's call it like the 15th of January, there were 3,500 managers who owned one card or more. So that's on the 15th of January, 3,500. If we go 1 month later, you're up at 5,000. So like that's like a 50% increase in a month. But then from the 15th of February to the 15th of March, you're up over 10K. And then it just kept going. So like the first major moment was Valentine's Day 21. Gary V tweeted, and we in the community, it's kind of known as the Gary V boom. It'll be often referenced. Gary V boom was February 21. And then it came out, did the 50 million raise at a 400 million valuation or so, I can't remember. And Gary V and SoftBank and all were investors, and everyone got very excited. So that was the first like, holy shit, let's go moment. So that was very exciting.
Were you creating content at this point yet? When did you start that?
So I got very lucky in a sense that I was making the football index content. I was one of the like top creators over there, but it was still quite niche, as in like I didn't really have a YouTube presence. Kind of did a few videos and a few streams, but I put out my first couple of Sorare videos in the January 21.
Okay.
Maybe even December, and they were more like almost like I got approached to be an affiliate for Sorare, and I was kind of like bringing Sorare to my football index crowd, and I put out a couple of beginners tutorials, and basically what happened was in February they were like top of the SEO, and everyone watched them, and loads of people signed up using my link.
Nice.
And it was obviously a massive influx of cash. ETH was worth a lot at the time. There were a lot of like people with ETH, so it was like they were spending tons. I made a load of money, to be frank, from that affiliate deal, and I went like, I should do this more. So I was looking at Football Index, which had been annoying me for 6 months. I was completely unmotivated, doing it for the sake of doing it, and I canned it, gave it a few months, and then lent into Sorare content. I think maybe from April or March 21, I really just started going at it, a few videos a week, and that's where it all started. Kind of lineup builders and bit of trading, and then 5 top tips and the 3 things you shouldn't do and all that sort of stuff. And then that was the kind of start of my content, I think.
That's incredible, man. What a perfect timing, but you had already set yourself up for success and being a go-to guy. And I mean, it's just taken off from there as the platform's taken off. You've been right there the whole way, a true staple to the Sorare community. It's funny.
It wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for that one tutorial I put out. Like, sitting down on a random January night going, I'll make a Sorare tutorial, putting it out. Crap camera, crap lighting, crap everything, crap editing. Shit, it was just, like, compared to the content I put out now, it was terrible. But somehow it just caught the algorithm, and it was like, done. If that hadn't happened, I doubt I would have done it. I might have done it one day, but I wouldn't have done it as quick.
Interesting. Yeah, that's cool. I mean, it does. If you're putting out valuable content, right? I mean, especially if you're the first one there, people are going to watch it, and it's gonna come through. I remember my first videos. My journey to getting started on Top Shot was that very similarly in timing to this Sorare boom that you talk about, maybe the Gary V boom. We're talking January, February of 2021 was the same time as the Top Shot boom, right? And my first purchase on NBA Top Shot was actually after hearing a podcast about a huge LeBron James sale sold for $50,000, this YouTube clip, right? And really looking into the collectible side of it, seeing jumping into Discord, which I had never done before, and seeing how crazy passionate people were about this platform. I jumped in March of basically February 28th, March 1st was my first purchase on NBA Top Shot. And the reason that I started my YouTube channel later on was because the market had crashed, right? And I was still passionate, still believed in the platform long term, and was doing little things here and there so that the investment that I made didn't go, it could come back around, right? Like it crashed, but hey, there was still waves. It was still a roller coaster. The space was still new. Let's try to help some people out so that the community doesn't go away. And maybe I can help some people along the way bring that investment back, or at least have some fun in what they're doing and stick around. But it was recorded on, my old MacBook Air, Zoom, no camera. It's funny how things get started and then just you end up loving the craft, loving what you're doing, and turn it into something full time. So awesome that happened. And after that explosiveness, I would say on Sorare, one of the cool things that I've noticed about it, right, is that it is incredibly clear cut in its mission and in its goal. It's a fantasy game. I listened to a really good Spaces on Twitter the other day where they kind of touched a little bit on the collectible aspect. I also listened to the Sorare data stream where they touched a little bit on the collectible aspect, but doesn't seem to be in the minds of the Sorare community. And the sole focus is the fantasy sports aspect of it, which is great. It's really refreshing is what it is. But what I'm getting at here is with that in mind, it seems like it allows for a little bit more steady guidance and growth without having to redirect paths. Has that been true in terms of the growth? Has it been steady? Has there been a solid, the community like actively involved in it, or has there been huge waves of ups and downs, attrition in the community, big time speed bumps, or anything like that?
There hasn't been, I wouldn't say there's been attrition or many people dropping off. Obviously, occasionally some people throw their toys out of the pram on Twitter or whatever. But ultimately, they're probably idiots who, they aren't like I completely get being skeptical and being real and leaving something if you don't believe it anymore, and managing your kind of risk and diversification and whatever you're into. And if you stop believing it or having confidence in it, take it out, blah, blah, blah. But quite often what you'll see is people who just like to scaremonger and they love the drama of social media. Sure. If Sorare ever actually do something that's like, holy shit, this is terrible, I'll call it out in my channels. And if it's terrible, then that's okay. Let's go, it'll all go mad. But sometimes you see people leaving, but then they're back 2 weeks later. That happens all the time. I don't think there's never been a mass exodus. It's been growth and growth and growth. And there's been moments where it's picked up. There's been moments where the growth might have slowed for a week or two. But overall, it's consistently been growing for a couple of years. Like you can see all the charts in Sorare data. It's just been consistently growing.
Wow.
Sometimes faster than others.
Do you think that's a big contributing factor to that is the stability of the product in the games? Because that's something that's really refreshing to myself, is to see the weekly game week schedule that I know is never going to change. That is 2 games per week. That is, the scoring is going to be solid. That even though we don't exactly know what the mint counts are going to look like next season, we have a decent idea that they're not going to change drastically, and probably confidence because they've had it in Sorare football, that it's not going to get completely out of hand. Yeah,
if they change that, it's game over because everyone will go absolutely mad.
Okay.
They've never, if anything, they've under-minted so far in football. Like if they can mint 1,000, they might have minted 400. Some players more, some players less, but it's like they've never, I don't know if they've ever went 100 for 100. They probably have. But I think like the fantasy game is okay. So in terms of if we talk about fantasy versus collectability for a minute, right? The way I look at Top Shot is low serial numbers count. There was a lack of utility, predominantly collectability. And that can work if the IP is established over time and nostalgia comes into play and people get money and people want what they want and they'll pay whatever they can to get it, like soccer cards, football cards, basketball cards, baseball cards. That's because Topps and Panini have clout over generations. And I think as these platforms over time, if we back them long term, if Sorare is still around in 2037, which it might not be, I think it's actually more likely that it isn't, even though I believe in it more than anyone in the world, just because that's how life goes. The chances of any company staying around that long. But let's say it's around 2037. You can be damn sure the year one NBA cards of rookies that go on to have successful careers will be worth a shit ton on collectability alone. Collectability and a culture of collecting takes time to really cultivate. And I just don't think you can cultivate that in 1 year. And I think like Top Shot came out of the bat as a new platform that everyone thought collectability is everything and everyone's going mad. And I don't know much about Top Shot. It doesn't look like it's ended great, or not that it's even over, but you know what I mean? It hasn't transpired amazing. But back to Sorare, the utility of their game is incredible because every single week while the football season's on, and it's global, so there's always a football season on, you have something to check in for. You could be winning something. You have football to follow. You have things to do, but it's a very utility-driven platform. They're leaning more into collectibles, and they do want to do that. We all think we all in the community already thought when basketball came out, the Top Shot crew would come in and want all the low serials and thought collectability would come to the platform from Top Shot heads. That's on NBA. But in football, even with this Global Cup they're doing, they've got, this is the first time we've seen it, collectible only cards being rewarded where they have no utility. They are collectibles. So in this Global Cup for the World Cup, I don't know how much you know about this or how much you've seen this, but I'll tell just for the listeners anyway. Basically, you enter in, there's mad prizes up for grabs. It's free to play, completely free to play. But they're also giving away, I don't know if it's like 70,000, thousands, tens of thousands every match day of the World Cup. They're giving away these national team cards that are beautiful, but they will not be able to be used in future editions of like SO5 or like the gameplay. They are collectibles from the World Cup, which is a completely new thing we've never seen. They're almost going into like Panini or Topps like sticker albums for the World Cups. It's like you can collect them all, and they won't have utility value. So it'll be really interesting to see. I think we will, in January, post World Cup, everyone's got all these cards. We will see very clearly how much people value collectability because there will be cards on the market of the best players in the world, the Mbappes, the Messis, the Ronaldos, that are only collectible. You cannot use them in SO5 and utility. You can't yield from them.
Yeah.
So will they be worth $5? Will they be worth $100? I don't know. But they're definitely looking to lean more into collectibles. I just think it takes time.
Yeah, it's tough to tell. I mean, you do make a really good point. For me, just looking at the outside end, you would think that the culture within Sorare so far in terms of like the gameplay, the utility, they would be a little bit less valuable on the collectible side because it's so uncertain and everyone has that mindset that you had as opposed to Top Shot, right? Like you said, Top Shot came out as the digital collectible of the future, right? And there was monetary upside there. There was tangible monetary upside. There's people making millions of dollars, maybe not millions, but hundreds of thousands of dollars from getting in early and selling these digital collectibles. One of the things that a lot of people got excited about on Top Shot but lost track of mind to is exactly what you said, right? They did believe in it as a long-term collectible, the first of something brand new in a completely new industry, which is Web3. But one thing that kind of lost people sometimes is how special is something actually, right? Like how special is a play from 2020 going to be 20 years down the road just because there's no fans in the stand and it's off here, there's no fans over there, right? But that kind of got lost. And then another thing too, a parallel is that I think Sorare is doing really well is making the game inclusive for everyone, right? When it comes to collecting these tiers and legendaries, rares, commons, we saw the rares just become more common the legendaries just become more common and the commons just become more common. There's really a, like from an inclusivity standpoint, like two really wide opposite ends of a spectrum. Whereas in Sorare, you're playing for free, right? You can get a new card every single day. You can have fun. It allows for growth. And then if you wanted to level up, you can even win those for performing well in your team, which I think is so cool. So a lot of good things, I think, moving in the right direction. And even though all those things are there, I still think it's incredible that there hasn't been much attrition, that there's been steady and consistent growth within this. And that's amazing. That's a big testament to the product that they have over there and the vision that it is. So really,
I think the free to play is a huge thing. Sorry, I brought it in there. Small delay.
Going in.
I think the free to play mode's huge for onboarding and just huge for ease of access, because what was always the problem with Sorare was the barrier to entry financially.
Okay.
It's very hard for someone who's a casual sports fan. Like, if you just put yourself in the mindset of the average sports fantasy player who plays in these leagues, maybe in America they play for big money, but like to come in and be like, oh, I can play for free, they will get involved. If it's a good game, they'll get involved. If it's $20, they're like, yeah, okay, I can probably do that.
Sure.
Oh, but I have to set up a wallet and I have to do this. How did I get the 20 quid in? See, whenever like it used to be like, where if you wanted to play, the only way into the football side of things was rare. Limiteds didn't even exist like a year ago. I think it was, or maybe just over last August 21, I think they come out. Anyway, before that, it was like you had to buy a goalkeeper at rare, and like the cheapest ones were like 500 quid because every team needs a goalkeeper. So I don't know, the barrier to even begin to start to play might have been 500 quid to $1,000, something like that. And it's like, the amount of people that will ever play that is so limited that like they couldn't on board. But I think now that they're leaning into free to play, the Global Cup, the World Cup is all free to play.
Yep.
The NBA has a great free to play mode by all accounts. I haven't really played it too much because I'm not a big basketball guy.
It's awesome.
Like, it's so, yeah, people think it's great. That is what's gonna, I think, bring them if they're ever going to go mainstream, this is how, because you need to have a free to play game with almost like the pro version, get people hooked on the concept, the game, because it is genuinely great gameplay. And then if people want to go and stick 20 quid in, 50 quid in, 100 quid in, they can. But it's optional. It's not it's not the be all and end all. There's a point in playing for free, because the question I always get on all my tutorials is, can I play it for free though? But can I really play it for 20 quid? But can I really play for 50? Is there any point in trying to compete for 100 quid? These are the questions you get all the time. And when the answer is yes, people will come with their masses because it's a genuinely great game,
Yeah, it truly is. And we don't play except for our own wagers in fantasy football out here, right? You pay your league manager and then the winner gets the pot at the end. That's how it all works. But it's really, if you wanted to play for free, the fun is there. And that is a really good point, man. I think I didn't even realize that you were having to spend a lot of money to enter those football contests.
Early days, yeah.
Prior to, you said August 2021. That's about
August 21's when the 1 of 1,000s come out. So in football, if you're in the NBA, football side of things is a bit different, where your rare cards are our limiteds. Our limiteds are 1 of 1,000. Our rares are your super rares. Our super rares are of 10, and our uniques of 1. So back in the day, it was like whenever they had this massive surge from the Gary Vee boom of people, the best players in the world might have only been licensed for a season. So that was another factor. We've had a couple of seasons worth of minting now, whereas it was the first season, the rare cards, they might have minted 80 cards of the best player in the world, and there might have been 20,000 people who wanted that card. So the prices went nuclear, and then the barrier to entry was just massive. So that's why they introduced the new scarcity of limited, which started off slow, flew up, has come down a bit again. But yeah, I think like the free to play is obviously a massive, massive incentive for people to give the game a go who are skeptical, and everyone's skeptical about NFTs and blockchain in the football world. I don't know what it's like in basketball, but everyone's skeptical. And I imagine people have heard people getting burnt on Top Shot and losing money here, and NFTs crashing and cryptos dying, and the recent scandals haven't helped. So like anything that's like free, people will be much more likely to be like, well, what can I lose?
When did they introduce? I mean, I agree with you, everything you said right there, and it holds true to basketball, any sport. I think adoption of crypto right now, which is my question. Top Shot was always able, for me at least, to purchase by credit card. When did the crypto wallet? Because I know it's, from what I can tell, the Sorare community is a lot more. I mean, they're used to paying with ETH, at least the guys that are early on. When did they introduce the credit card payments, and how big of a catalyst was that to adoption?
I actually can't remember, to be honest with you. I can't remember.
Yeah.
Because I got started with Coinbase and transferring over to Coinbase wallet and then into Sorare, and a bit clunky, but I got the hang of that, and that's the only way I ever really did it. Now I have bought some cards with credit card, to be fair, but I forget when they introduced that. I don't think it wasn't like a moment where the community went, "Oh my god, this is going to change everything."
Sure. Okay.
It was obviously much easier, the MoonPay and Ramp and whatever else now to get people to be able to deposit directly with the card, but I don't remember there being like a watershed, absolute crazy moment.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, that makes
It
sense.
might have been. Maybe
the timing of everything. Yeah, I mean, it could have all just kind of gelled, like you're saying. Yeah. I mean, that's
it might have just been part of the whole thing, and it wasn't the main. Like, there's been so many milestones for people to shout about. It's probably one of the more boring things people would shout about. Getting certain clubs licensed, getting certain things, getting this, getting that, gameplay enhancements, whatever else. I think like when credit card was added, wasn't a big song and dance.
Okay,
but
got it.
Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. I think no, it does all make sense, and we're starting to get this more clear of a picture here of Sorare and their brand and its space and its fit into the past couple of years here, which is so cool. I do want to talk about the Sorare community at the end, because that's been one of my favorite parts of Top Shot. But before we get there, real quick, just one last thing on the growth and the explosion and the activity. Let's talk about like some of the investors. Like, how big has it been to have names like Lionel Messi, Serena Williams, Gerard Piqué, and Mbappe as part of that brand? What's that like? Having those types of guys back the company looks like on a consistent basis.
If my dog barks, I'm sorry, I muted myself there. He's going mad. There's probably a postman. Yeah, I think it's just validation, isn't it? Whenever these humongous, some of the biggest athletes in the world, most recently Lionel Messi, best footballer of all time, I think in most people's minds. Mbappe was humongous. Serena Williams was great. It's one of those where people always expect, I think within the community, people look at the likes of Serena Williams and go like, why isn't Serena Williams talking about Sorare? Why isn't there tennis? What's Serena Williams doing? But apparently she's key to opening lots of doors within conversations that inevitably brought MLB and NBA in particular. So that is why that move happened. That is what happened there. There's loads of other footballers. And I think outside that, the biggest point of validation from an investor standpoint was the $4 billion valuation, 700 million raise, Series B.
Yep.
Last September, I think it was September 21 is what I'm going to
September 21, 680 million in September 21.
Yeah, so that was humongous. Like, that was another moment. That was the second Gary V boom. That was like, this shit's real. Because French president or prime minister, whatever they call it there, Macron, is that who he is? Anyway, he was tweeting about it like it was they're like the French unicorn. They're the biggest French company. It's the biggest Series B raise ever in Europe or something mad. To the point that whenever I was in Paris last month, and this is just a side story, I don't even know if I mentioned this in my podcast. It's not that interesting. That's probably why I didn't. But I'll tell you now because it's kind of on the topic. I was out for dinner in France with a guy who makes my videos with me. We were over there to see Sorare and go to a Paris game. And we were sat at dinner in this small restaurant. And there was a couple, these restaurants where there's like 6 inches between the tables. So They were right beside us on a date. And at the end of it, we were kind of squaring up with the waiter and having a bit of a laugh, and they got involved with a laugh, and then they said, "Oh, why are you here?" And we told them, and they were like, "Oh, Sorare, yes." They said, Nicholas Julia, the French unicorn. Like, these two random people sitting at dinner knew the name of the founder and CEO of Sorare.
Wow.
Called him the French unicorn. It's a humongous thing in France, and that Series B funding and raise was like a real moment of like validation. And I think for a lot of people who had played Sorare, like for me at that stage for 1 year, and maybe put in 5, 10, 15, 20 grand. I'm talking people who were past kind of like the smaller account stage, like semi-whale kind of big fish at that stage. I think that moment was like, let's go, let's lump in. We can trust this, because maybe it's poor logic, maybe it's the wrong way to look at things, but I think for a lot of people it's a case of, if these humongous multi-billion dollar funds and accounts and lawyers and people are willing to put 700 million into this, they've done their due diligence.
Yep.
So I no longer have to be skeptical over the economics of it all, and is it a Ponzi, and is it going to be a rug pull? Is this too good to be true? You know, whenever you get to that stage, you kind of go, they don't give 700 million to someone without doing the due diligence, and they're going to do better due diligence than I ever could. So you just trust the 700 million or 680 price tag. And I think that moment was a real moment of like, this is absolutely mad. You know, it was insane.
That's crazy. And you know what, though, too? I must say, you know, there has been a lot of companies that have raised a lot of funding that people kind of felt the similar sentiment to, and it hasn't quite worked out. But I think one of the cool things is that Sorare has not given people a reason to waver on what their plan and their mission is. And that gives you even more confidence to bolster that huge raise that they've had. Probably not a lot has changed since that raise. Am I right? I mean, like, in terms of the game, in terms of everything that goes along with it, just continuing to build a stable brand, which gives people confidence.
I think the biggest thing off the back of that raise was that people expected results immediately.
Okay.
You know, people expected like, oh my God, there's 700 million now. Let's go Premier League tomorrow. It's happening. This is going to happen. That's going to happen. They're going to fix rewards. They're going to fix this. They're going to fix that. But really what happened was, at that stage, they were a team of like sub 10 people, 10, 15 people, whatever it was. And they just raised, they were valued 4 billion. It's obscene. So what happened then was recruitment. And it's about recruiting correctly and recruiting the best in the world. And that was a longer process than many maybe anticipated. And the way I always talk about the Sorare community and Sorare themselves in HQ, I'm an air traffic controller, leaving it next month to be a YouTuber, which is fucking mad.
Wow.
But I've been an air traffic
Congratulations, man.
Yeah, let's hope it works out. But I've been there, you know, whenever we do our training for emergencies and blah, blah, blah. One of the big things they say is, I've said this in my podcast, so if there's anyone coming over to listen, you'll have heard this analogy, but it's a case of in the cockpit during an emergency, and I'm not saying Sorare getting 700 million in emergency, but it's like a holy shit moment.
Yeah.
Or in any moment, whenever you're in the cockpit, it's the time distortion. If you're in the cockpit during an emergency, one of your engines is blown out, you have 8 minutes to get back to the airport, you're doing a million things, checklist, pressing buttons, doing this, doing that. 8 minutes will seem like 10 seconds to you, because you're in the fire, you're in the cockpit, you're in the heat of the moment. To an air traffic controller, what they always say to us is, that 8 minutes for you is going to feel like 4 hours, because you're sitting there. The last thing they need is you chirping in your ear. Your only job is to make sure everything else is out of the way. The runway's clear. If they ask for something, you give them it. If you think something's a valuable suggestion, like there's an alternative runway available, you give them it. But you're sitting there twiddling your thumbs while you know there's a plane burning in the sky coming towards your runway, and everyone's listening, and it's fucking crazy. But the time distortion for the air traffic controller, it feels like 4 hours. For the person in the cockpit, it feels like 10 seconds. In reality, it's 8 minutes. And it's a bit of a dramatic comparison, but that's how I look at Sorare HQ versus us. We're on the outside looking in. We're thinking all these things need done, but realistically, we can't do them. We just have to wait for them to be done. And we're all wanting Sorare to launch the Premier League. We want them to do this. We want to know their World Cup plans. We want to know this. We want to know this. There's this. There's these million things. And they're in the cockpit going absolutely fucking mad trying to get it all done. They're in HQ. They're working on license deals. They're working on fundraisers. They're working on World Cup plans. They're negotiating with the Premier League. They're working on collectability. There's back-end, front-end developers. They're hiring. They have 170 staff now. In their head, they're moving at 1 million miles a minute. They're building as they're what is it, like they're building as they fall. They're like they're constantly going, but to us it's like, will you hurry up? It's just this time distortion. So out the back of that raise, there was this period of, when are we going to see what's happening with the 700 million? But in their heads, they're like, you know, doing a million things. Wrong
Incredibly good
analogy.
perspective. Yeah.
But that's the way I looked at it, and it's still the same. It's still the
That's
same.
almost a mic dropping perspective, because I think everybody here that's listening to this that is, um, you know, in the NFT community can take what you just said and have a new perspective on it. I mean, the analogy is great. The
It's the best
analogy,
one I ever made, so I've said it like 4 times on
yeah.
all pieces of content. So I'm glad
And
you
man,
liked
air
it.
traffic controller, man, is it as stressful as everybody says? It's supposed to be the most stressful career. Hopefully, YouTube's not as stressful as air traffic controlling for you, my man.
The beauty of air traffic control is when you leave work, you leave work. The problem with
Okay.
YouTube is you're always thinking. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, it has its moments. I think the thing with air traffic control is you're paid for the 1% of the time, the 0.01% of the time where you're like heavily stressed. The rest of the time's all right. And I think the longer you're in the career, the less stressful it gets. But like, yeah, when shit hits the fan properly, doesn't it? That's
Amazing. Amazing.
the kind of job.
Well, I'm not going to take up too much more of your time. I did want to talk just a little bit about what the community looks like over there, because as Top Shot, the reason that a lot of us are still here are the community and the relationships that we've built along the way. There's team collectors, there's people, there's the Twitter community, the Discord communities. Like, we've truly become friends over the past 2 years doing this. We've seen each other live at live events, NBA Summer League, gotten together for games, suites, just organized from Top Shot down, and also just organized within our own community. Sorare is spread out. I mean, like, you guys are in a bunch of different countries over there. Is there localized communities? Is there localized online communities?
Yeah.
How could somebody who wants to have a sense of community within Sorare get involved from what you've seen on the football side? And I'm sure it'll naturally evolve within the basketball and baseball side too, but at least from what you've seen.
So I think if you're coming in out of nowhere, out of just, oh, this is a cool game, let me play this, I think Twitter is the natural hub of Sorare users. Like, Twitter is the social media platform of choice. It's not Instagram, it's not LinkedIn, it's not TikTok or whatever. It's Twitter. So Twitter is where you would first get involved. You probably just create a profile, start clicking around the hashtags. You're not going to be engaged with if you don't engage with people. So you need to it's like whenever you move to a new city, no one else gives a shit you're there. You need to go and make your friends. So you need to go out and start talking to people, get a sense of the community. There's loads of sort of private discords and sort of sub communities and little groups of 50 people here and 20 people there who are all constantly talking. I'm in a few of these, and it's 24/7. They talk to each other more than they talk to their parents, which is quite damning, really, quite sad. But that's life, isn't it? That's what we do. So you can, exactly, it's your passion, it's your hobby. So you can find these communities. And then I think in terms of like the issue is there's multiple languages. Now, there'll be a huge French community, there's a huge Spanish community, Italian community, there's an American community who obviously speak English. With the English and English communities are all English-speaking countries, and obviously a lot of Europeans do speak English very well. So there's people from all over the world in the English community, but I think like the French community is very isolated in France. The Germans are in Germany, But in France, like I know when I was in Paris, there's 30, 40 guys there, meet up every week. I don't know if it's 30 or 40 every week, but there was about 30 there the week I went, and they're renting out 3 or 4 football pitches, like little 5-a-side matches, and playing games, and then they have pizza and beers afterwards. And you'll see constant community meetups. I flew to Orlando earlier this year to meet like 15 guys, a lot of the Americans obviously, and a couple of us from Europe. I've been to London. I held a meetup in London for the kickoff the Premier League season, and 60 people came to London.
Nice.
We had a big event. There's loads going on in the community. It's just about getting stuck into your language's community, which if you're listening to this, you're probably English speaking. Twitter's the place, and you'll make friends, and you'll be invited to Discords and WhatsApps and whatever else, I'm sure. But it's like everything. You'll get the value out you put in. If you're in there talking away, giving out value, doing a bit of research, if you're an expert in a certain league or team, and you're bringing that to a community, that'll resonate with them, and they'll want you in their communities for that edge. So that's kind of how it works as well. No one wants to just carry dead weight and give all their tips to someone who just sits there and ghosts, So taking out what you put in, I think.
No doubt. It's going to be really exciting to see how that develops. It really is. Because I'm sure it'll come along naturally and organically, just as the communities that we've developed in Top Shot did, as they have. So Amazing, man. I can't wait to be more involved with it. Don't think, I'd love to get involved with the community on the Sorare football side. Don't expect myself to be playing many matches because I don't follow, like I told you privately. A big Cristiano Ronaldo fan. I'll be pulling for Portugal. Got grandparents from Portugal this upcoming World Cup. And of course, pulling for Team USA too. But are you excited? I assume just a couple minutes here as we wrap things up. Who's your team you're supporting? Who do you think's the result's going to be? And you're obviously going to be playing Sorare.
Obviously, yeah, I'll be going balls to the wall to try and win that Global Cup. I'm a weirdo, so at club football, I don't really support anyone. I grew up a Manchester United fan, and then fantasy, like Sorare, just clouded my judgment, and I started cheering against them because they're bad. So I said, I'm not going to even call myself a fan anymore. So I'm just like a fan of my Sorare players or whatever fantasy players win me points or money. That's where I'm at. In terms of the World Cup, because Ireland aren't there, it's very hard to know who to support. I'm kind of following it as a football fan. Again, I'll be supporting my players on Sorare because I'll have players there. I'll have Vinicius Jr., Jude Bellingham, Mbappe. I'll have different players there, so I'll be cheering for individual players in individual games. I don't think there'll be many games I don't have exposure to, but it's in terms of who I want to win, anyone but England, probably.
There we go. Hopefully Portugal can take them out for you. We've done it before. We can do it again.
I'd love to see I'd love to see an underdog. I'd love to see someone go far, like I don't know, a Croatia, or like imagine like a Mexico went deep, but they won't, or like I don't know, a relative underdog would be nice.
Nice. Always. That's awesome. Who is you talked about supporting your players, right? Who are some of the guys that you've done the best on, like buying low early in their careers, like we talked about earlier on? I know, what comes to mind for me is, of course, I don't know a whole lot, but like when we were talking earlier, a guy like Joao Felix came to mind from Portugal. Like those, I think he was 16 years old when he started getting on the map. He played for one of the top Portugal clubs, either Benfica or Porto or something like that. But then he obviously got a huge contract still at a young age. And I don't even know personally how well he's performed in my, I don't know. I haven't really followed it that closely. But who are the guys that you have placed confidence in and have really, really jumped onto the scene and got you some solid wins in Sorare?
I think like
they're probably no secret anymore, I'm sure, but
no, they're not. My biggest ever flip, and I've had cards go the other way too, where I've bought back someone and they've died. Not died, that's wrong. I actually haven't died, but I mean in terms of price. But I don't know, like early days, or there was a trade I did back in May. You could say there's a bit of luck involved, but I bought a super rare Rodrigo who plays for Real Madrid for like $5,000. I don't know what it was an ETH at the time, and 2 weeks later sold it for $10,000. So
wow,
5K in like 2 weeks, and that was because Real Madrid, they won the Champions League, and it was luck because it was a mad Real Madrid collector who wanted the cards from the Champions League, from the year they won the Champions League. So he offered me money. I said no. He offered me more. I said no, and then he offered me 10 again. I said let's go. So I felt like I'd won the lottery there. But I remember early days in that Gary V boom, there was a couple where I was like, I remember actually being down in my living room watching TV, and I bought this Ruben Diaz, who now plays for Man City. I bought a card of his, and I don't know what I bought it for. It was probably at the time, because ETH was like $200 at the time or something. I maybe spent 200 quid, 300 quid on the card.
Yep.
And this was before Sorare had any sort of mad numbers associated. It was early February, and I sat downstairs, feet up, and I got this email and looked at it, and someone had offered me like 1,400 quid or something mad. It was like, I remember I was literally like, I don't believe this. Like, pure like disbelief. Like saying to my girlfriend, like, what is going on here? Except I've won the lottery. I just made $1,000. It was like crazy. Then obviously they put all that back in. So that's compounded. But I don't know. There's a few there that have done well. Rafael Leao probably is the biggest one. There's a Rafael Leao guy, plays for Milan, young Portuguese player. You'll see him playing for Portugal.
Okay.
But I got his super rare, I don't know, like a year ago. I paid 0.7 ETH. Don't know what it was at the time, but like latest sales for that, like that card sold for 9 ETH.
Wow.
Earlier this year, most recently sold for like 6.5. The floor is about 7.5. So like that's probably the one, I think. That was a longer answer than I planned, but it's whenever I'm making myself out to be the hero, we'll talk forever.
That's exciting, man. There's wins, there's big wins, big losses, some losses, I'm sure, but those ones you definitely
Big
remember,
losses.
man. And I think, yeah, that's really cool to hear. What's the biggest sale that you've seen on Sorare? I think the biggest record breaker for Sorare NBA just was like 59K for the unique Kevin Durant. I don't know if it was the unique or a super rare Kevin Durant, but it was yeah, $59,000 US for KD.
Yeah. The highest ever sale was the Erling Haaland unique. It was at the start of this year, 30th of July this year. It sold for $678,000.
Wow.
So that's the biggest one we've ever seen.
Wow, $678,000.
Yeah, and Mbappe sold in May for $438,000. So
how's the return?
Stupid money.
Are those producing results? What's the top prize in those? What's the top prize cash wise in those competitions?
In unique, if you're playing in the unique divisions, like, I mean, if you win like super, I don't know, like 10, 15, 20, 25, 30K, like big money. You can win if you win the divisions, yeah.
Okay, amazing.
But yeah, I'm trying to look like what these cards have yielded. So like these cards have won some absolute, they're obviously churning out every single week. So like even recently, one of those cards was part of a team that yielded a super rare Jude Bellingham. So a super rare Jude Bellingham last sold for 14 ETH. That was just like 3 weeks ago. So like you're talking big money.
Could be a good return. Amazing, man. Amazing. Well, unless you have anything else for me, you know, I'm sure we could talk for days and days and days, but I'll let you get going here. I think it was so awesome having you on, man. I really thank you for joining us here and being so generous with your time. You know, I would love to return the favor someday. If there's anything else that I can ever do for you, man, I really, really appreciate it. I think just a lot of knowledge packed in. You know, I think about the knowledge that comes from just being somewhere for a really long time. And I was kind of hoping that those two things could collide and help some people here as we talked through this and got to know each other a little bit. And I really think it has. So thank you. Thank you so much, John. Really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And hopefully people know a bit more about the history of Sorare now.
Yeah, I would think so. All right.
Cool. Cheers.
Signing off. Cheers. All right, there you have it, people. Thank you for watching, and thank you again for subscribing to the channel. Take a look at the links down in the description of the video and check out the other content that I put out in other forms on other channels of social media. A huge thanks again to John Nellis. Hope you enjoyed this interview, and I'll see you on the next one soon.